playing it pretty smart so far.
So let me ask you one more question before I open this up. The Americans dialed Delhi this morning as America-led forces struck on Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, this may seem to like an attack on Yemen, but this is an Iran-backed force, and this is a force that is the Houthis have supported Hamas in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Obviously, there will be increasing pressure on India to maybe take a side overtly rather than de facto. Would you say that that time has actually come to join the America-led coalition? There are those who say that India can never be part of a coalition under a US flag. That's never going to happen. But do you think that it's time to reimagine some of those old positions?
Okay, now America has called this operation as a multinational operation, but that's not true. There's only one Royal Navy, one British ship, and the rest are all American ships. America's own NATO partners, Spain, France, Italy, have backed out of this operation.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is an escalatory move, highly escalatory move. We already have enough conflicts on our hands, and this is certainly going to, broaden the envelope. And I think there are a lot of people, including the Israelis and the Houthis, who want to drag other actors into this conflict so that it can be prolonged. It is not in India's interest to get involved in this. American strikes on Yemen, I doubt how much effect they will have. Iran has proved that it's a very resilient nation, and Iran's proxies are equally resilient, and they've lasted for years and years. So if America thinks that bombing a few places in Yemen is going to stop this whole action, it is, I think, mistaken. And India would be wise to stay away from it. And Indian diplomats have proved that they can tread a very fine line, playing the middle game. So we don't have to join this. We've done enough. Our ships are there, our navy is there, and whatever little we can do to protect our own shipping, I think, is being done.
Okay, let me take this to Ambassador Sinha. Admiral Prakash says it is not in India's interest to get further involved in this. It may be called a multilateral coalition. It's very much an American coalition. That's point one. And point two, I think he's calling for an urgent maritime strategic policy, which maybe has not been prioritized to the same degree in the last few years. You would say what, Ambassador Sinha?
Admiral is
Hang on,
absolutely
sir. I
correct
can't
in
hear you.
saying,
Yeah, go ahead, sir. Yeah.
sorry, I would say that Admiral Prakash is absolutely correct in emphasizing the importance of the sea lanes for India, both for our security and for our foreign trade. And almost all our foreign trade goes through the seas. But over the last few years, in fact, 2 decades or so, these seas have become extremely dangerous, both because of Somali pirates and because of the Houthi rebels. Now, the Red Sea itself is very important for India because all India's trade between India and Europe goes through the Red Sea. And the Houthi rebels targeting this trade annoys almost every country in the world. Even the UN Security Council adopted a resolution recently in which Russia and China abstained. They did not veto the resolution. Of course, the resolution did not call for a UN force, but that would eventually come up if the Houthis insist upon attacking ships passing through the Red Sea. And some ships have already started taking the route around Africa, which is extremely expensive. This will affect India's foreign trade. Now, India has been active in the Arabian Sea against the Somali pirates. We just saw the Indian Navy carry out an operation recently. So if the situation worsens in the Red Sea, then India's trade will be impacted, and we'll have to think over our policy. So far, yes, we have been very hesitant to join any joint military operation anywhere. But right now, we are cooperating with the Western forces and international forces in the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea. And if the situation worsens, then obviously we'll have to rethink our position, because the fact is that while we can say that the effort to control the situation should be a diplomatic effort, it's very difficult to knock the Houthis out. Saudi Arabia has been trying for the last several years now to do it, and Iran will continue to back the Houthis. But the fact remains that if the Houthis, as a small group of bunch of gangsters, shall we say, in the absence of any other word for it, continue to target civilian ships on the plea that they are all going to Israel, and the fact that even international ships have Indian sailors on board, roughly 1 in every 7 sailor on international ships is an Indian. So we have Indians involved everywhere. So we will have to think of our cooperation in this field very, very carefully. Of course, our capability will have to be looked at, and there Admiral Prakash's view will have to be taken into account. But the fact remains that the other point that we have to worry about is that in case China decides to start cooperating with the Western forces, which it can, China is quite nimble enough to do this because China is also will also be affected in case the Red Sea shipping lines close down. And there we will then miss out. So we will have to keep our lines open with the US. And even if we don't join the coalition, we must cooperate with it very closely, both to ensure that we remain active in this area and to protect our shipping lanes.
You seem to be arguing, Ambassador Sinha, that India has already taken a side.
Yes, we are already partnering because remember, we are operating in this area. And even earlier, when we were operating as a Somali pirates, we were cooperating with Western ships in this region because it's impossible for us to operate entirely on our own.
Let me bring in General Katoch at this point. General Katoch, go ahead. The point is that while the admiral is very sort of sage and wise in saying that why would we get involved in conflicts that are not our own, Ambassador Sinha makes the point that this is an unpredictable situation and this could start hitting us directly. Even when we look at MV Kem Pluto, it was, after all, headed towards New Mangalore. Many of these ships that have been targeted have actually been heading towards Indian ports. Go ahead, General Dhruv Katoch.
Thank you, Barkha. Barkha, in my view, it has already started hitting us directly. You see, the cost of shipping has gone up. A very large number of the merchant shipping is now taking the Cape route. So there is an increase in cost. There's an increase in insurance, as the Admiral has so clearly brought out. But that doesn't mean that we have to join in this particular coalition. The name which they have given it to is Prosperity Garden. Yeah. Now, I think we are doing our bit. Leave the Red Sea aside, where this coalition is working. I think the slocks, the sea lines of communication, they are huge in the Arabian Sea. And India is committed to defending those slocks. We are already doing it. That is how we managed to rescue one of our ships. It wasn't our ship, but our sailors were there. Now, I think the fine balance which India is likely to draw. I'm not part of the policy establishment, but in my assessment, I don't think we are going to get involved in what's happening inside the Red Sea. There is a very, very bitter battle going on there, which is going to escalate further. But I think in the Arabian Sea, where the slocks are, and those slocks are defined lanes, we are going to keep our warships there. They are already there, and they will be continuing with their attempts to keep the sea lanes open. This is one. Number two, as far as the Red Sea is concerned, you see the Houthis, when the Saudis waged a war on the Houthis, I don't think the land forces were capable or competent enough. Otherwise, they would have finished this game long ago. There was a very great deal of incompetence involved in the way the events turned out. But for India to get involved anywhere there, that is not our war. Regardless of the fact that we may be impacted or affected, I don't think we should get involved in anything which is happening in the Red Sea as of now. I have a feeling, and this may turn out, the attack on the Houthis may actually cross over to an attack on the Iranians. And then I just don't know how it is going to spiral out, because my fear is that if the American forces, it's really the American and British forces there, if they get together and they attack Iran, and then Iran goes and takes on the oil wells of Saudi Arabia, finding that an easier target, then we are going to have a muddle in that area, which I don't see anybody getting out of. The Americans are in a comfortable situation, very frankly. They are not dependent on West Asia for oil.
But I think you've picked up the key question. What if this becomes a full-blown conflict with Iran? At the moment, this is the Houthis, along the coast in Yemen, Padma. But there are multiple fault lines being exposed in our maritime policy, or Admiral Prakash might say the lack thereof. There's what's happening with the Maldives. There's the there's the China factor, there's our warships in the Arabian Sea, and then there's the Houthis in the Red Sea with the subtext of the Israel-Palestine conflict, and Iran being what we're trying to balance our relationship with while cooperating with Western forces. I mean, this needs the agility of an acrobat. Padma, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Barkha. I have maintained for several months now in various pieces that I've written that World War III is actually already in progress. I think few of us want to call that out. If you go by the definition of a world war involving more than two adversaries, I think this meets the definition in every way. The only difference is that, the world has changed since 1949. Almost all the major powers have trade and oil ties or some other ties with each other. So no, countries are attacking each other. What they're doing is, this is a world war that is being cleverly or not so cleverly being fought through proxies, through militant groups, through radicals, through mercenaries, and not directly between big powers. And there are adequate numbers of those across the world, especially in the Middle East, North Africa, and closer to home, Afghanistan and Pakistan. So to that extent, I feel that yes, India is playing a kind of a tightrope walking over the question of getting directly involved in the US-led coalition, if you like, in the Red Sea right now, but is going, certainly making sure to protect its own ships and to protect its own assets there. But I really feel that, if more Indian ships are involved, then we will have to, as one of the speakers before me was saying, India will probably be forced into a corner to take a more definitive stand on which side. Earlier in the Second World War and the First World War, it was a black and white world. Today, the world is gray. There are so many shades. So that's why this war is being played out through proxies. And to the second part of your question, how is it going to, does it involve several players? I mean, you look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is really caught between a rock and a hard place. It was at war against the Houthis in 2015. That didn't yield anything. It was on the verge of cementing ties with Israel, but had to stop because of the Israel-Gaza situation. It has ties with practically all those who oppose the Houthi, but it has an ideological bind over Palestine. So, its oil trade has been affected by the Houthi attacks. So Saudi Arabia has its own considerations and may even recognize the Houthi authority over the Western Yemen in the long term. So, but the thing that worries me now, as Ambassador Sinha was just pointing out, General Katoch just pointed out, is that, the latest thing to come out from the Houthis is that they've threatened Saudi Arabia, UAE and Qatar not to open their airspace to the US-led coalition. This was, just a very recent report just now. Otherwise, else they will consider it a full-blown war, which it in a way already is, as Admiral Prakash was saying. The Americans have left the comfort zone of just being a presence in the region. They have directly now launched attacks upon what is essentially a sovereign nation, which is Yemen.